Hi, I'm Oliver and I use he, they pronouns.
I'm Nathan, I use he, him pronouns.
I'm Oscar, I use he, him pronouns.
Welcome to All Things LGBT+, Youth Edition. Today is a trans-specific episode and it is Monday, April 30th. Alright, our first topic is coming out. So I think what we're going to do is maybe share individual experiences as well as tips for other trans kids watching this. All right, Oscar, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I have been out as trans for, I think, 3.5 years maybe a little less, I'm not really sure, somewhere in that area. And originally I didn't come out as trans, I just came out as gender nonconforming because I just didn't really know. Not to say that being gender nonconforming is just a transitional phase, because there are people who come out and they're gender nonconforming and that's their gender and that's it. But for me personally, I just was trying to figure out where I stood and where I was along the gender spectrum. And so at first I didn't really change my name, I just kind of asked for different pronouns to be used for me occasionally. I didn't really specify if I wanted exclusively they, them. So at first I just went by she, her, and they, them, and so nobody ever really did anything other than she, her, and my dead name. Okay, so my coming out experience was kind of generic for the trans experience, especially living in a liberal state. My parents are cisgender heterosexual people who come from cisgender heterosexual people, so they didn't super understand what I was going through. I had to educate them about pronouns and about gender because they had a very hard time understanding, and because at first when I came out I was using exclusively they, them pronouns, and they didn't understand just the typical, but that's plural, you're not more than one person, which isn't technically the grammatically correct definition of that pronoun, but I had to acknowledge that they needed to learn that, and so I had to talk to them about that, and they came around eventually, but they had a hard time with me wanting to change my name because I'm named after, well, not now, but I was named after a person in my family, and so my mother kind of took it personally that I was changing my name, even though it wasn't personal, but she sort of took it personally at first, and so we had to talk through it before she let me change my name, and then it took a bit longer for her to let me change my name legally, because she just, I guess, had to mourn that name, which sucked for me, but that's how cis people are. And so, for the most part, my parents were pretty accepting. They wanted to learn, but because they were cis and come from cis, who also came from cis people, they didn't really have any exposure, because my dad's parents are very conservative, and so they never would have let him be exposed to that. And my mom grew up in upstate New York, so she wouldn't have been exposed to that whether her parents would have allowed it or not. So they didn't really know where I was coming from, and they came around eventually, and we no longer talk to my dad's parents because I'm trans. We came out to them, and there was a whole problem, and because they, quote, don't agree with that lifestyle, and it's not a lifestyle, and it also isn't something you can agree or disagree with. It's like, hello, I am trans and I am a human being. I don't agree with that lifestyle. That's not really a thing that you can say. Well, I guess you can, but it doesn't make any sense. And so my immediate family was pretty accepting, but my extended family was and is still struggling. At least my mom's parents make an effort. They call me Oscar. They use he, him pronouns. They mess up sometimes because they knew me for 13 years before I came out and changed my name as my dead name, and I only ever see them like twice a year. So for what they're getting, they're doing a good job. But my dad's parents are not doing great. They make no effort whatsoever actively speak out against like organizations that would support me and my identity, and actively support people who harm trans people. And my grandfather has never called me Oscar, ever. And my grandmother has called me Oscar maybe twice, and has never used my preferred pronouns for me. So we don't really talk to that side of the family anymore, which was hard because we grew up with them, obviously, but it was ultimately beneficial to me and my mental health to not talk to them anymore. Yeah, that's about all I got. I don't want to be too long-winded, so that was it.
Is it my turn?
Yeah, I think so.
All right, cool. I have been out as trans for 2 years, I think. 2 years in February. And I was not one of those kids who, like, knew from the start that I was trans. I was always very much, like, I was really uncomfortable for, like, the majority of my childhood, and I didn't have a reason for it, and I couldn't put a name to it until, like, I was older, and I was like, maybe it's because I'm not being feminine enough, and then I was like, when I get my period, I'll finally feel comfortable in my body, which was not true, and then, like, when I go up a cup size, I'll feel comfortable in my body, or when I, like, cut my hair this way, or get these certain clothes, I'll feel comfortable in my body, and it all just, like, culminated into being really, really uncomfortable for the majority of my life, and also, like, not being able to, because my brain doesn't like that, like, I don't have a lot of memories of my childhood, which sucks, but, I, in 8th grade, shadowed someone at Montpelier High School because I wanted to go there, and they had, 2 trans friends, and it was the first time I had met trans people my age, and I'm still very close with both of them. And I was like, oh, this is an option for me that I can have, like, people like me, like, people my age like this exist, and immediately my brain was like, oh, this is an issue that we have to think about and panic about for some time. And so I, like, unconsciously panicked about that for 3 months, and then I started high school, and I remember having a conversation with my friends, like, very early in the school year. We were talking about gender, and I was like, yeah, I'm definitely a girl, and I had, like, a physical disgust reaction to that. And then, like, a week later, I was like, hey, can you guys, like, use they, them pronouns for me just for, like, a little bit to try it out? And they were like, okay, sure. And I ended up coming out first as, like, genderqueer, and I would oscillate back and forth between, like, having girl days and boy days and both days, and eventually the girl days just stopped happening. And, like, I got increasingly, like, unhappy with the definition of being genderqueer, and I got really, really depressed, and I, like, dropped out of school. And I was out of school for probably 3 or 4 months because I was depressed and suicidal. And then I got really suicidal, and then I went to this hospital diversion program for at-risk teens in Burlington. And I decided I was going to use a different name. And I used a different name for the first time ever, and I was like, oh, this is right and correct. And so I only had to spend 3 days there for me to, like, automatically be super improved, and it was probably just because I changed my name. And so I came back, and I was like, hey, Mom, I think I'm just a boy. And she was like, cool, keep me updated. And then I got increasingly better, and I changed my name, and I was like, hey, guys, I'm a boy. And then I, like, went back to school, and I was like, I'm a boy now. And everyone was like, okay. And my family my parents were fine about it, and my mother is the best person in the entire world, and has always been, like, super supportive and, like, my biggest advocate, and, like, is probably the best person I know in the world. And my dad had like weird struggles with it where he was like, like for a while after I transitioned, he was like, if you're not trying to be the most masculine version of yourself, why are you angry when people misgender you? And I was like, that's not fair and also mean. And other weird things like that. But like in the past like 3 months, actually, he's like gone through like this really like, I think it's hit him like how much, like how nuanced like this situation is, and I am proud of him because he's awesome too. And then like it took I think I was really lucky because my dad's side of the family, my cousin came out or was outed as gay before I ever came out as anything, and I think that like softened the blow of me being trans, and it definitely like wasn't easy, and there was a lot of like, because my cousin is super flamboyant, there was this experience where he came home with nail polish on, and his dad was like, take that off. And they got into a big argument about it, and like his dad's final argument was, I don't want you to end up like Nathan. And which is really bad and something I still think about. I don't even know if he remembers it, but like the majority of my family is super great now and like super awesome, and it's really a testament to like how far people can come. And my mom's parents are really good about it. In the beginning, I like went out to brunch with my grandma because she was like, I want to understand this, which is like a really noble thing to do. And like for a while they like were using my name and my pronouns, but it wasn't like they weren't like trying enough. And so like I actually sat down and had a conversation with them where I'm like, you need to try harder. And I think my grandpa like really got that, and he really understood that. And my grandma like is getting a lot better, but she does this thing where like she'll misgender me, and my grandpa will call her out, and then she'll be like, I feel like you should give me like a grandma pass on this, or like a discount or something. And I'm like, no, absolutely not. No, definitely not. And I think it's something like where she doesn't like want to feel guilty. And I think it's really hard for people to feel guilty, but it's also something you probably should feel guilty about. So yep, I'm done now.
Yeah, I've been out as trans for like 5 months, not very long. I definitely didn't know for like up until like literally a few days before it came out, but and I never had any sort of like you talked about like being uncomfortable. I never had any of that, and I was like 100% sure. I even said a few times when people asked me like what do you think about transgender people? I'd be like, oh yeah, they're great, but I'm definitely 100% cis. And yeah, so that was I guess unexpected to me, and I was never like, I was okay with me being trans, but it was weird for me to like think about that in like a whole new way relating to me, because suddenly I was like part of a group that I didn't necessarily know a lot about, and it happened in like a very short amount of time, and then it came out in a hurry because I was starting a program at the State House in like a few days, and I didn't want to start as a girl and then transition like halfway through that, because it just would have been easier to start out the right way. So had a very hurried coming out experience, and I think my parents took it okay, and they've just been learning more stuff and asking me more questions and like figuring things out and realizing what they need to be doing, I guess, to support me. So yeah, they're doing really, really well at this point. I've had some interesting reactions from friends, mostly supportive. Had one very uneducated friend who is still pretty uneducated, but that's someone I'm trying to like work with to so that she can like understand more what I'm going through and what she needs to know to support me and all of that. So yeah, I don't have a lot more to say besides that on that subject. What like tips do you guys have for trans kids in terms of coming out and like how you can do that? and make it go as smoothly as possible? Like, what would you think?
I think it's hard for me to like conceptualize that right now because to me it feels like I've been out for a long time, and which it really hasn't. I haven't, but the like activist in me wants to be like, you're who you are, and you don't like have to give people time, and you don't have to like try to be understanding of people or like tolerate like the learning curve that cis people learn at, which is very slow. And like you don't have to be like palatable and acceptable for cis people, and you are who you are, and that should be outright accepted. But that's also like not how it works, which is tiring. And I think so much of what people tell you is like be understanding of people taking time, but also like you don't have to be understanding. Like you can demand respect from people. Like you have that right, and you like deserve that. And if people don't understand, that's not their fault. That's on them. That's not your fault. It's on them. And the best thing you can do is like, as long as it's not like impacting your own physical or mental safety, like be the most authentic version of yourself.
Yeah, I don't know if I really have like the experience to say how to make it go smoothly, because mine was kind of messy. Because I didn't really come out to my parents. It was just kind of like gradual buildup of them finding out information about me. There was never a moment where I said I'm trans to them. It was just kind of gradually me dropping hints and just kind of like
Mood.
the buildup of them being like, oh, so this is what we should be doing. And so then it kind of became common knowledge that I was trans, and it never really was a big moment where I just said, I'm trans. And like trumpets play in the background. It wasn't like a moment like that where you see in the movies.
The 3 movies about trans people.
Yeah, where they all die at the end.
Yeah.
But I would definitely say that you, in this situation, you are the most important. Prioritize yourself and your comfort over the comfort of cis people who you're coming out to, because cis people and people in general don't like their worldview challenged, and that's part of being a human being. And so especially if the person you're coming out to doesn't have any experience with trans people, they're going to be confused at first. They're going to have a lot of questions, but you are not obligated to answer anything that you're not comfortable with.
Google is free.
If
costs $0.
$0.00, and it takes no time to open Google, but so
a click.
Yep.
Even
if somebody asks you a question and you're comfortable with answering it, by all means. But if you're starting to feel like it's becoming exhausting, if engaging with people's questions is exhausting and it's tiring and it's hurting you mentally or physically, prioritize yourself. You're more important than cis people who are uneducated. Your job as a trans person isn't to be a walking, talking encyclopedia. You do not have to take on the role of educating everyone around you. Google is free. There are resources out there, and you shouldn't be bombarded with questions that you're not comfortable with.
And I think initially it's going to feel like you want to answer everyone's questions because you're so excited to like share this like authentic you with people, and it creeps up on you how exhausting it gets, like because like weeks after you've come out and you're still answering these questions from people, and like people are still unloading how they feel about your transition onto you. It's like, we're not your therapists. Like, we don't care how you feel in this situation because it's not about you, it's about us. And so be aware of like how you're feeling, because that exhaustion can creep up on you really, really like slowly and quietly, and it's like really hard to get out of that like educator situation once you've got into it.
Yeah, I think it's definitely important to know that like other people's emotions in this situation really don't matter at all, and that when you come out to someone, it's like you shouldn't feel like, oh my gosh, I've like ruined this person's life and caused them a bunch of stress because like that's their fault. And like I've had experiences where I come out to someone and then they ask me a bunch of like very offensive questions or say a bunch of transphobic things, whether they realize it or not, and then when I get mad at them and try to educate them, go on like a rant of all their excuses about like, oh, I've been really like stressed out for the past month about all these things. Like, I don't care, and I don't need to know. So I think it's important that you don't need to listen to people when they talk about that, and it's okay to just like be very frank with them and just tell them like, I don't need to know, and to make sure they know what they need to be doing to support you.
Cis people get so scared of like the stereotype about trans people that they're gonna get so mad when you make a mistake, and like
That too.
trans people feel like they have to like be overly accepting and overly apologetic to people because of that stereotype. You're allowed to fulfill that stereotype. You're allowed to be like, that's messed up. Please stop.
You're allowed to be the aggressive trans person
Yeah.
that everyone seems to think we are.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't feel sorry for the cis people who are scared of asking questions. Like, you can yell at them if they're being stupid. That's fine.
Once again, Google is free.
Yeah.
It takes nothing to Google a question you have, because I promise there are resources out there that aren't the 13-year-old trans kid that lives in your house who probably might not even know.
Right.
Yep.
Being trans doesn't make you an authority on like trans activism or
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Yeah. So
You don't
definitely
come out
individual experiences are very
you don't
different.
come out as trans and then immediately the fairy blesses you with all the knowledge of trans history that has ever happened.
You wake up one day and you're like, Sylvia Rivera.
And you just know everything. That's not how it works. So don't take stuff from cis people who are trying to be invasive and ask questions that you aren't comfortable with, and who are unloading their feelings and thoughts and emotions on you. Like they misgender you and you correct them and they say, oh, it's so hard for me too. I'm going through a lot. This is really affecting me.
Here's all the reasons that I misgendered you, like other than the fact that I just messed up. And I'm not going to apologize for that. I'm just going to apologize for all these other reasons that I didn't actually misgender you. I just, like, these are all the other reasons.
Yeah. People need to learn that misgendering is something that's like, it's not, like, it's very simple. If you misgender someone, you apologize quickly without unloading all your emotions or giving any sort of excuse.
Or even, like, not even apologizing, just, like, correcting
yourself.
Yeah,
you don't even have to say
on.
anything. Just, like, say the right thing and then continue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Next thing we're going to talk about is sort of two things, like medical transition and also dysphoria. And before we start talking about this, I do want to note that, like, this is a special, like, occasion for talking about this subject, so you can't just, like, walk up to a trans person and be like, hey, what's your medical history? So, yeah, this is, like, this is an occasion where we are talking about this, but that doesn't make it okay for you to, like, bring it up in conversation with your trans friend.
You shouldn't ask about someone's medical history unless they bring it up to you.
So I definitely just don't want to, like, note that so people don't take this the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
And also our experiences with being trans and wanting to medically transition or medically transitioning aren't, believe it or not, the authority on what all trans people want and need. So just because one of us or all of us want something or need something doesn't mean that every trans person does.
Mm-hmm. There are trans people who don't want to, like, transition at all and want to, like, present, like, still as the gender they were assigned at birth. There are trans people who don't want to medically transition. There are trans people who want to fully medically transition. There is no universal trans experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. So on that note, do you guys both want to share whatever you're comfortable sharing about, like, medical transition in general or your personal experience? Or
Nathan, why don't you start, because you are the most
I'm the most complicated.
Yeah.
The most highly evolved. I have had top surgery, which is technically called a double incision mastectomy, which it's not really a mastectomy because in regular mastectomies they like don't pay as much attention to like aesthetic, and also they don't take like fat as well as like actual mammary glands. And so I have 2 big scars that go like this. And that was almost 6 months ago. And I have also been on testosterone for a year and a month and a half. And that is why my voice sounds normal. And causes a bunch of other things to happen. And that's really like all I want for my medical transition. Like after I got top surgery, like my dysphoria was virtually gone, and like is to this day, and like not really existent anymore. I also have a theory that like is a controversial theory that dysphoria is pretty much solely based in like societal expectations of what it means to be physically or like mentally a man or a woman or neither. But I'm pretty content in my own medical transition at this point. Like I have gotten all that I have needed from it.
I'm not really super medically transitioned. I've been on estrogen blockers for, it was a year on like the 10th, I think, of this month. It was a year. And I am less than a month away from starting testosterone. My appointment to get a prescription is in mid-May, so I think it's on May 15th, and so then it's just going to depend on a bunch of other stuff when I'm actually going to start.
Be able to shoot up.
Yep. As far as things that I would like for my medical transition, I don't really want anything other than just testosterone and top surgery. I don't have a lot of bottom dysphoria. If it really comes down to it, I might get a hysterectomy because being on testosterone and having a uterus can do bad stuff to your body. You don't need to have a hysterectomy, but I have a bad family history as far as body chemistry, and so I'm not going to take the chance. But yeah, I don't really feel like I need bottom surgery. I like the idea of it, but frankly, it scares me too much to actually go through with it, and it seems like the consequences would far outweigh the benefits for me, because it's so much healing time, and it's so much, and it's so different from what you know, that I feel like it wouldn't be something that would be incredibly helpful for me. So.
And there's a lot of people who like feel very much the opposite and feel like it's worth and feel like it's like
for sure
good enough that it like is something that they want and that they need.
Yeah, like there are trans people who need bottom surgery to feel okay in their body.
Yeah.
And that is completely a valid way to TM, because as we mentioned earlier, there is no right way or universal way to be trans.
Yep.
Yeah, I think a lot of, like, everyone has different experiences, definitely. And there's also, like, different people have different dysphoria levels or no dysphoria at all, and you can get, like, whatever, you can transition however you want, regardless of dysphoria as well. And, yeah, I think some people, like, are not, like, I'm not interested really in passing as male, partly because I'm not male. Like, I'm non-binary, so that definitely has something to do with it. Because I don't want to pass as female because I'm not female, but I'm also not male. So, I think part of my, like, medical journey is probably just going to be finding out, like, what I can do to sort of be somewhere in the middle. And, like, I've heard of non-binary people who take, like, a small amount of testosterone, and then that sort of, like, it doesn't have as big an effect. So like, I wouldn't completely pass as male or, like, be completely, like, with all the effects of T normally, but I would still, like, sound different and feel different. So that's something that I'm kind of interested in the future. I'm not allowed to take hormone blockers for some reasons, but yeah, so pretty much for me, I'm just like waiting 2.5 years until I can actually do anything.
Yeah,
But,
and we also can't speak to the experiences of like trans women either, like
Definitely.
at all. And this is a very like a panel of
small representation of the trans community.
Yeah.
Just 3 white trans mask people.
Yeah. We're probably the most privileged kind of trans person that you can get.
For sure. Like,
not probably, we are.
We are.
Yeah.
We're the most privileged. Like, it's just like with anything, there's levels of privilege that you get when you're trans, just like when you're anything. Being a person, like a black trans woman, that is probably the least privileged type of trans person.
The life expectancy for trans women of color is like 32.
Yeah.
Which is
horrible. The murder rate of trans women specifically far outweighs the murder rate of trans people in general.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Especially trans women of color.
Yeah. Which
is a huge issue. And it wouldn't be right for any of us to assume or talk about the experiences of assigned male at birth people who identify as trans.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely a good thing to mention, because that's a whole different topic, really, that we can't address, and that it would be cool in the future for us to maybe like get someone on here who can talk about that, but so that's something maybe we can do. I'm not sure, but yeah. So the other thing I want to talk about is a question I get asked a lot is, does your sexuality change when you transition? Which is, yeah, I think we just like want to clarify that.
That's complicated because the answer is no, because sexuality is also like biological and genetic the way that like gender is. But at the same time, the way that I view sexuality is like my own sexuality is like really, really fluid, and it actually like dramatically changed when I started T, which is like definitely not like a universal experience.
That's interesting.
Yeah, but and probably just has to do with like the way my sexuality is set up in general, just like being really fluid all the time. But it's definitely not a universal experience, and most likely, no, your sexuality doesn't change when you're.
Yeah, I mean your label can definitely change if you're like if you're a trans guy, and so you're assigned female at birth, and like while you identify as female or while you're like labeled as female, you're straight or you consider yourself straight, and then when you transition, then you're gay. So your label does change sometimes, but the actual sexuality, like that part doesn't change. Who you're attracted to doesn't change, even though your label might. So that's confusing to some people, but definitely something that's, yeah. And also, as you mentioned, it's very fluid, so you can like use different labels at different times, and it can change and go back and forth. Or it can stay the same for some people, I guess. It just like always is exactly the same, but it's flexible.
I had a very confusing experience and relationship with sexuality, because before I came out as trans, I identified as a lesbian, and I'm not sure if that was me rejecting the part of myself that was trans, or if that was me saying I can't be trans, but if I identify as a lesbian, I can be masculine, which obviously isn't the truth, and you can be masculine or feminine no matter what.
I had a very similar experience.
But I don't know if that was like a way for me to express my masculinity without admitting to myself that I was trans, or if that was me completely trying to suppress the male part of myself and just be like, I don't want anything to do with men in general. And so I don't know what that is, but now that I've transitioned, I identify as, I don't know, like my sexuality is super fluid. I'm currently in a relationship with a person who identifies as male. So at this point, I just say that I'm gay, because explaining my sexuality to straight people is a nightmare.
Straight people are a nightmare.
That's very true. And so I just say that I'm gay because it's a lot easier, but that really isn't the case. Because if you want to be super specific, I guess the word that I like for myself is androsexual, which is you just like masculinity. So kind of just regardless of the person's gender identity, I am more attracted to people that are masculine.
Yeah.
That's a mood.
All right. Is there anything else you guys want to cover, or any additional comments, advice, anything?
Didn't you say you wanted to talk about dysphoria?
Oh yeah, that's something we didn't talk about really. But yeah.
Should we define dysphoria?
Yeah, that's definitely
Cis.
something that for the cis.
For the cis.
Yeah, that's something that I find a lot of people actually have never even heard of or don't understand.
And then we should probably address the question: do you need dysphoria to be trans?
Yeah, that's
Same.
a question.
Dysphoria is defined as the physical or mental pain that more often mental pain that some trans people feel because of the disconnect between the gender that they are and their body. And there are a lot of trans people who don't experience dysphoria, and that's cool and awesome. And I count as one of them now.
And what I really would say, the definition of being trans isn't do you have dysphoria, it's gender euphoria.
I love that definition.
It's you don't be, for instance, someone who is trans-masc, you don't feel terrible when you're called with female pronouns, but you feel a hell of a lot better. Sorry, am I allowed to say it? Okay. When you're addressed as male. So, that's gender euphoria, and you're trans. That's how it is. If you feel better being addressed by pronouns other than the ones that were assigned to you, you're trans.
Well, I mean, there's also people who use different pronouns and that feel really good for them, but also still there's a lot of people who identify as women who will use he/him pronouns, but still identify as women, but feel more comfortable with those pronouns because pronouns, well, unfortunately, in our society, are associated with gender, don't have to be.
Yeah, and language is fake, so you can use whatever pronouns you want and identify as whatever gender you want, because we made up gender, we made up the concept of that, we made up the concept of sexuality, and we made up the concept of language. So you can...
Everything's fake.
You can be and do whatever you want, because at the end of the day, we're all gonna die, everything's fake. So do what makes you happy while you're alive.
Wow, okay.
If transitioning makes you feel good, transition. If using pronouns other than what society says you should, use them, because you can.
Life is short.
Yeah.
And pronouns are fun.
Yeah, I think it's there's also trans people, a lot of trans people who don't care about pronouns at all, or who are pronoun indifferent, or non-binary people who use their assigned pronouns just because it's convenient.
Mm-hmm. Everything's fake, dude. Just ask people.
Yeah, just be like, hey, what pronouns do you want me to use? What name do you want me to use? And then just do it. It's not hard.
It's not
isn't
hard at
difficult.
all.
If you can memorize your multiplication tables, you can remember somebody's pronouns. It's not hard. You're just being difficult for no reason.
Yeah, my mom has this saying that you don't have to understand. You just have to not be a dick.
That's effective.
And I try to live by that.
Yep. Yeah, I think you also you don't. I think a lot of cis people take it very personally or emotionally when you tell them your new pronouns or whatever, but it really doesn't have to be a big deal at all. And
but also, if you want it to be a big deal, then it's a big deal.
If you want to
kill it,
scream it, and make it a huge thing, you can. But if you just want to mention, hey, I'm using these pronouns now, and people should just go with it and not ask you stuff unless you bring up topics to talk about, which is just a general rule. But
you deserve to have your name spoken as you want it to be, because names are just sounds that you like, and so if you like a sound better than another one, you deserve to have that sound used for you. Just like the sounds of pronouns. If you like the sound of one pronoun better than the other one, you deserve to have that, and you deserve to be respected as a human being. And someone claiming that they're gonna use the wrong pronouns for you just because they don't like you is not just because being called the right pronouns and the right name isn't a privilege for good trans people. Basically for trans people who are palatable to cis people, that isn't.
It's just a basic human right.
Yeah, it's a base. Like, if I was in a fight with a cis person, I wouldn't start calling them she if they were a cis male. I wouldn't do that.
Like, I really don't like Caitlyn Jenner, but I would never misgender her because she's a woman. So,
and cis people, when you say that, are just like, what? Like, no, I think Caitlyn Jenner is a terrible representation of the trans community, and I really don't like her, but I would never call her her dead name or call her with male pronouns because she is a woman, and it's basic human decency to respect that. And it isn't, like, a right that you have to earn to be called the right name and pronouns. It is something that should be expected, and that if people mess up, don't feel bad about correcting them.
Yeah.
Obviously, if it's safe for you to do that, don't feel bad about correcting people.
Yeah, and you shouldn't feel like indebted to a person because they're using the right pronouns, even though they're mad at you. Like, if you're in a fight with someone, or it's someone who you really hate and they're being awful to you, like, just because they use the right pronouns doesn't mean they're being any less of a jerk. Like, you could still yell back at them. You don't have to pretend that, oh, well, they didn't misgender me, so, like, it's fine.
It's not the worst that could happen.
Yeah, so that too. Like, it's not something that, and also cis people shouldn't ever, like, use that as, like, guilt trip a trans person by being like, well, I've never misgendered you, so, because that's just,
I haven't misgendered you this week, so, like, I deserve an award.
Yeah.
It's cool. You want, like, a sticker or something?
Like, the dream trans person for cis people is, like, you have, like, a bag of, like, hard candies, and every time they get, like, it's like a dog. Like, you shake it for, like you would shake for a dog, and every time they give they use the right pronoun, you just give them a hard candy. And, like, you're readily available to answer any question about trans history that they have, or any question about your own medical history, because obviously you're entitled to that, to just know a random person's medical history and know what a random person's genitals look like. So, obviously that's your right as a cis person.
Yeah.
That was sarcasm.
just to clarify.
Because I know some people struggle with it. That was sarcasm.
I think it can be really hard, like, dangerous, too, to, like, start talking about pronouns and, like, gender as, like, a want, too, because some people, like, it's not like I identify as something. It's like, I am this.
Yeah.
And they're like, I choose to, like, identify as a trans man and not just a man, because I like trans as a political identity and, like, a way to, like feel powerful in the world, because I think being trans is, like, beautiful and complicated. But there are a lot of trans people who just identify as, like, men or women and, like, don't need that to, like, be a part of their identity.
Yeah, it's fine to want to pass as cis, or, like, you don't have to feel
I
as
don't know
if
why you would
just
ever
because...
want to be cis, though.
And that's another thing. Not all trans people want to be cis.
Yeah.
Because apparently that's something that cis people think.
That's ridiculous, yeah.
They, like, as soon as someone comes out, they want to be cis. That isn't true. And, like, obviously some trans people who are stealth, I just want to be perceived as a man, and that's it. That's my life. But there are trans people, myself included, who are like, I'm not cis. I don't want to be cis.
Yeah. Please don't ever think that I'm cis.
I don't want to be perceived as cis, and I have privilege in that. I have privilege that I don't have to be stealth, that I can live in my community and say, I am a trans man, and just be proud of that fact. And not everybody has that. But because I do, I am going to do my best to use that to the advantage of other people in the trans community who don't have that.
Yeah.
Those of us who have the ability to say things that make people uncomfortable, like, at least I feel a responsibility to keep on doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think it's also, like, if you're a trans person and you, like, wish you were cis, or your goal is to pass as cis, that's fine too.
Yeah.
And if you think of being trans as, like, an irrelevant detail in your life, that's fine, as long as you understand that, like, other people are proud of the fact they're trans, and that's something that's, like, important and an empowering label for a lot of people.
And also that maybe that feeling, like, acknowledging that maybe that feeling comes from a place of, like, internalized transphobia.
Definitely.
And, like the need to be cis is, like, something that comes from internalized dysphobia.
Yeah. All right. I think that's probably everything.
Yeah.
Unless you have any more. Yeah. All right. Thanks for watching, everybody. This has been All Things LGBTQ, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.